But don't be misled by what I'm saying. This man is very dangerous. Not in the sense of terrorism, but certainly in the realm of ideas and experimentation. And I draw your attention to his book launch today of a very interesting set of poems which are set in an extraordinary, difficult, and never attempted manner, particularly with reference to the content. He has chosen the sonnet form. Now, the sonnet, I'll tell you very quickly before I speak to Athar, dates back to the time of Dante and Petrarch and is later on adopted by Shakespeare. But the Petrarchian sonnet is very different from the Shakespearean one. Petrarch wrote sonnets in quintets and sestets, which means 8 lines and then 6 lines. Shakespeare, however, as is his wont, came up with his own form of sonnet, which is 3 quatrains and then a double line. He starts an argument in the first quatrain, which is further developed in the second, still further developed in the third, and the resolution comes in the last 2 lines. I cannot tell you what a difficult structure that is. If you speak in terms of the local ghazal, and you talk in terms of the strictures of Radif and Kafiya, it is perhaps as restrictive, if not more. So my first question to Athar today is, are you a glutton for punishment? Are you a glutton for punishment that you chose the sonnet form?
Well, I chose it because it was a challenge, basically. I'd done blank verse, I've done rhymed verse, and I'd experimented and written in various forms that I came across. But I felt that perhaps the sonnet, which has been neglected in the 20th century, even by leading poets, the only poet I can remember was W.H. Auden, who attempted the sonnet, the others didn't. Big names like T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound didn't. So I felt that perhaps, from my own milieu, South Asian milieu, but I should take this restrictive form and see if I can indigenize it, see if I can make it speak the language that I would like it to speak, which would be, of course, a departure from the Dante and Petrarch and Shakespeare diction. How far I've been successful is now for the public to decide. But it's taken me a good 4.5 years to write this book. And I've dated each and every sonnet so that people know the sequence in which they came and in which they were tackled, basically. Because the form, as Professor Nabi Shahzad had said, is a very difficult one and a very challenging one. But to be able to use that form in a manner which perhaps would be new for Pakistani literature in English, I thought, let's make a small contribution to it.
Well, I can tell you that it's a highly successful contribution. If any of you choose to read this slim volume of poetry, it is most rewarding. However, why I said he's a dangerous man is because he not only challenges himself, but he constantly challenges the reader. And I give you a very simple example of that. He recently finished his first full-length fiction book called Second Coming. Promptly after that, he publishes his poetry, which is called Telling Twilight. Now, both titles are missing the or an and that makes all the difference. Had he said the second coming or a second coming, it would immediately have brought upon itself biblical connotations. He chose not to do that because he talks in terms of a very strange love affair, something that I would never have associated with this extremely shy, in a sense, and very, very proper man. But I guess there are hidden shades to each one of you as a species. So tell us a little about Second Coming before we come to telling Twilight.
Well, Second Coming was actually a product of my several visits to Thailand. And I began to notice how the Thai speak English. I thought that was fascinating. And I tried to transcribe that as well. The idea which kept occurring to me was that if I was to create a love story between two young men, two young persons, man, woman, it would be a pretty ordinary way of addressing a love story. So I took the liberty of creating a love story around an aging man, Pakistani man, and a middle-aged Thai professor.
I need to stop you there. It's an aging bureaucrat, not unlike himself.
Well, I think the closer work of fiction is to the author or to reality, the more effective it is, and it can connect better than if it's just a work of fiction. So I had to put in something which is something of myself, which is being a bureaucrat, a retired bureaucrat.
I talked to his wife about it later, and she didn't have a clue as to what I was talking about, which is, I suppose, all for the better. Now, coming to our present-day publication, it's a very handsome book, and it also is a very precious book, because the title is of a very young Athar Tahir, sketched by that miraculous man called Sadiq. So I think, if for nothing else, at least for that, one can acquire a Sadiq and have him on your shelf. But beyond that, Athar, when you talk about telling Twilight, what is it exactly that you are aiming at?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, but all my books have this ambiguity in the title. You see, telling here can be used both as an adjective, that the twilight has a telling presence, as well as a verb, that the twilight is telling us something. And this is also something which I did in The Gift of Possession, my previous book, which won an award. Here, the gift is both something that you give and something that you receive. And the possession is in the sense of something that possesses you, overwhelms you to do something, and it is also the magical possession which individuals have, possessed by jinns and possessed by ideas or possessed by and obsessed by various ideas that float around. So a number of my books have that same ambiguity about them. Similarly, this award-winning book, The Last Tea, is actually about a tea master, a Japanese tea master, who commits suicide because he's been betrayed by his friends. And it rang a bell that you had Christ, and his friend betrayed him, and that was called The Last Supper. So it's intercultural and intellectual cross-fertilization, which helps one to look at things in a different manner.
Athar, what fascinated me about this particular book, especially, was the fact that the sonnet really, in its essence, is a little song. And more often than not, I mean, if you look at Petrarch, you look at Shakespeare, you look at the Dark Lady of the Sonnets and so on, these are love songs. There are lots of love songs here, but of a very different nature. And as Athar has told you, that this book reached completion after 5 years, you can see a very steady progression in maturity, in emotions, and in coming to terms with twilight itself. We should be very familiar with the idea of twilight because we time our prayers according to twilight. Sham ki namaz, Fajr ki namaz, they're all twilight prayers. So there is that essence also. It is a holy time. It is a time for reflection, a time for prayer. And this prayer is what you constantly hear as a refrain in the entire book. And if I have Athar's permission, I'd like to read one very fine sonnet to you to give you an idea of what he is talking about. Because he's not just talking about earthly love, he's talking about love for the divine also.
Peace.
Thank you. God's 99 attributes men invoke, or split him in 3 and call on each together, even as they bow and cloak one who could bleed and bled, and then beseech him into nailed divinity. Or the many gods their fears and needs have shaped in their own image, or a handful the fantastic encouraged to be reshaped. Some still seek out old spirits that reside in waterfalls that hang white beards, in stones and forest groves that whisper and guide them to healing illusions deep within. When the dark weighs more than it should, I too turn, but just to the one and only, you. That is not to say that all his poems are addressed to the divine. He can be very naughty at times, mischievous, I would say. And I'd like to read a very strange kind of sonnet, which is describing a particular situation that exists for modern life, which we're very, very familiar with. Just listen to this. Not uttered since Adam first saw Eve, and Soni swam the Chenab with a pitcher, and Majnu wandered across a land, each passing hour ached to a barren blur. What platitudes must I rehearse to tell of that quick stab of desire and shame, of an ardor that succumbs to the swell and the eternal search for just one claim. All is adaptive. So I adapt to you and let love speak in different ways to stoke a fragile flame or start a game where one you and one me make one, not two. And so cut love in many crystal rays, calling, as I call myself, by your name.
You know, she reads so well that sometimes I think it's not my sonnet, it's hers.
Well, I'm really flattered by that, and I'm really very privileged to have you by my side here today. What is it that continues to force you to write poetry? Let me put it that way. You've now moved towards fiction. It was a very successful, though rather strange kind of first novel. But what is it about poetry that continues to lure you back to itself?
That's poetry itself. I mean, the experience, I have this firm belief, which probably is something that I've learned from reading great Sufi masters, is that life is very simple if you want to make it that way. And if you want to make life complicated, it can be very complicated. It really depends on the individual, how he wants to address this great journey that we have to undertake while we are alive. And so when I read fiction, and in fact my first book that was published was a collection of short stories way back in the 1990s. With prose you can expand and you can dilate and you can talk about things in a manner which is expansive, extension of the idea. In poetry, it's the other way around. It's a reduction of everything. It's using words in their most essential form, and words that carry weight, words that carry a whole history behind them as you manipulate them into a certain poetic form. So it was that, and it still does, because my next collection is coming out, hopefully, later this year, also a collection of poems, two long poems, one on Bahadur Shah Zafar, and how he was a poet, the last Mughal emperor, and how he addresses his own decline, and how he looks back at what he was and what he is. So it's something that lures you back again and again, because it is words at a very high pitch of understanding. Whereas in prose, and I thought I should write prose because there was something that was challenging in its own way, you can explain, you can give opinions, you can manipulate characters, and that has a different feel itself. But poetry, I find, is the acme. It's really the high point of one's experience. If you can reduce your feelings, your thoughts, your experience to just a few words, and those few words can communicate, then you've connected with the world.
Well, Arthur, looking at the audience, and we do have a lot of young people sitting here, and I'm sure some of them attempt to write poetry. Can poetry writing be taught?
Poetry writing as a mechanism, as a tool, can be taught. It's because you learn things like assonance and alliteration and rhyme schemes, and you learn about structures, or what a sonnet is, or what a ghazal is, or what a lyric is, or, you know. But what you put into that form, it's purely yours. You have to decide. And that's something nobody else can do it for you. So it's in that way it can be taught. The technique can be taught, but the inspiration and the ideas that you wish to put in, those cannot be taught. Those you have to work at it in your own way. You see, even if you look at T.S. Eliot, such a big name in 20th century poetry, his quartets and his Wasteland, you know, he submitted the manuscript to Ezra Pound. And Ezra Pound, if you look at the manuscript, which was published later, page after page after page just draws a red line across that this is irrelevant. So even a poet of his stature, you know, can write a relevant work. And it needs another poet to tell him that, look, this is not on. Your words will speak better if all this is taken out. And that's why the work is such a masterpiece now. So in that way, technique can be taught, but nothing more than that. It's your dogged hard work. You see, my grouse with most of the people who write poetry in English in this country is just because they can speak and write English, they think they're poets. They don't work at it. If you were a musician, you would keep playing the instrument until you get it right. If you were an actor, you would keep acting until you refine your characters. Or if you were any other creative person, a carpenter, he has to learn his technique, how to put the joints together to make a chair or a table. But here, everybody thinks that just because they can write English, and even that, and I've judged so many competitions, that the English is not even correct. It's not even grammatical. And if you say, this is a poetic license, but the poetic license has to make some sense, you see. So work at it. The youngsters who are here who want to write in English, you have to work at it. You have to look at the form.
I
Only
think
then-
that's the perfect opening for Wasim Anwar, who heads the Resource Center, which Athar Tahir started. He founded that at Kinnaird College. I think that that is such a wonderful opening. Invite Athar to come and teach how to write poetry. We have a little bit of time if there are any questions, particularly from budding poets.
Firstly, you can only express yourself in the language you think in. If I think in a certain language, then that becomes my vehicle for expression. I was brought up in a very cosmopolitan period, land. My father was a consultant to the Malaysian government. So we grew up there, and then we went to, then I went to Lawrence College. We had an English principal, English housemaster, and English teacher. So the process of thinking evolved in English rather than, although we spoke Punjabi at home. I didn't know Urdu until I was admitted in class 8. So because I think in English and feel in English and read in English, so that was the reason that I write in English. My reading of a sonnet or a poem would pale before the wonderful renderings she does, and I would like to be excused from that.
If I may just add to what the gentleman just asked, you know, my late mother had a wonderful formula. She used to tell everybody, my children speak 3 languages. And she said it very proudly. She said, when we have guests, they speak Urdu. When they want to talk about romance and dating and so on, which she used to overhear when we were speaking over the telephone, they speak in English. And when they want to fight with each other, they fight in Punjabi. So I don't think in the world today, it is the choice of language that really matters as much as it used to, because it used to be the stamp of identity. We as Pakistanis are very fluent in English, and we should consider that as an advantage rather than as something that reduces us to a post-colonial world. There's more questions? Yes, there's one.
Firstly, Assalamu alaikum. I hope you're doing well. I'm a student from Lahore Grammar School Defense, and my question for you is, as someone who took on a very restrictive form of poetry, something which is new to Pakistani literature and challenges not only you but also the reader, how did you manage to navigate the balance between creativity and constraint, and what impact do you think this innovative approach has on the evolution of Pakistani literature?
Basically, you have to think what your role is going to be. And that propels you to write poetry or write prose, or even drama now. So it really is dependent on your aptitude that you find a genre to express yourself in. I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions? Ji Wasim.
To your work, mysticism or mystification that you prefer?
Actually, it's a bit of both, and there is also a third, a mythification.
Yes.
You see, you have mystification, but then you have mythification, in which you create a myth out of a person. When you write about a certain subject, and you have people acting within that creative parameter, then you can mythify them. In fact, there is a sonnet in the book, Telling Twilight, which talks about this mythification process.
I'm sorry that that's all the time we have, but I'm sure Athar will readily answer any questions in private if you have any. He's going to be around for a while and perhaps will sign books for you. Thank you very much. You've been very attentive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, everybody.